right. Well, this is our third week. We're getting somewhere with our voting. Want to encourage everybody before we get started that really it's all about getting the vote out. And we're trying to help you with the platforms. We're going to have voter guides, which will help you some issues and some of the specific people. But really, you need to know the platform, and that's kind of what we're doing here. So we've done 2 weeks so far. You can go back and hit those. Just go onto our website where you're at right now. You can hit the former ones. But we're going to be talking about the moral issues today. Probably the top of that list is abortion, but we're going to talk about a couple of different things as well. So, um, we have the beautiful picture, if you can see it on the screen right there. I happened to see that on the internet this week, and I was really impressed with it. We're formed by the Lord, and the Bible teaches us that. I know that in the issue of abortion, which the Democratic platform, it's extremely for. In fact, all of their nominees in the going into the Democratic thing this last election, all of those raised their hands for abortion. Many of them will go full term, and there are a couple of them that are going so far to the left that they're even after birth um, giving you the choice to terminate the child, which is murder. I can't see that any other way. And they throw around the term fetus instead of embryo or baby. Nothing could be further from the truth. But really, the word fetus is a Latin word. I was looking that up, and it really means the bearing or bringing forth or hatching of young. And so, it really doesn't just call it um, a thing, it's much more than that. It is a creation from the Lord.
Yeah, all life comes from the Lord. You think about how parents have tried to have children and they can't have a child, and then 5 years down the road after trying to have a kid, they finally have one, and how oftentimes we don't think about it this way, but we don't have a choice of the child. The Lord, He births that. He holds life in His hand, and He gives that, regardless if it was out of sin or in a beautiful marriage. He still holds the life in his hands, and he gives that as a gift to us. And I was just reading today that there was over 1 million abortions from the medical field, the formal medical field of America in 2023.
Actually, that statistic has been pretty consistent for at least 20 years. So that means in our country alone, we are aborting at least 1 million babies that we know of.
And that was the thing. The article actually went and it, I wrote a quote down. How this is probably an undercount because they are not looking at abortions that happen outside the formal healthcare system, meaning abortion medicine over the counter or from a friend is a very popular thing that cannot be reported accurately in a nation.
So the Democratic platform is calling it reproductive rights, which is not true at all. It has nothing to do with that. To say that, okay, it's my body, my choice, well, that's fine. It is your body, your choice. The choice should be made before pregnancy. But what about the choice of the child? And Dr. Ben Carson has really pointed that out. And of course, not only that, uh, with the 3D imaging that we can do for sonograms today, which are back when my kids were born, they looked like a really fuzzy black and white channel late at night. But today they're so clear. You can see the smiles, you can see the expressions, you can see when somebody is singing their response to it. To call that a thing is incorrect. So, what about the production rights of the child? What about that is a child, and if you want to call it a fetus, it's still a child. It's just a Latin word for meaning the same thing. We can't call it tissue, or we can't call it something that's arbitrary. With all science saying just the opposite. So it's a moral thing, and it's the difference between the two platforms.
And the Bible talks about, Jesus talks about how children are the most precious. How if you lead one of these young ones away, you're better off tying something around your neck and throwing it in the ocean and you be drowning. And how much more is it that God has given you a gift, and He's given you a job of protecting and having this little thing called a child being brought up, and how He's given you that gift, and how a lot of people have just thrown that away because they say that it's a financial hardship or it's hard on my body or this or that, and we come up with all these excuses. I just find it so hard. How could God entrust that with me and then I could just throw it all away?
It's as foolish as saying, well, my wife is a financial hardship, so I'm going to have her taken care of. It doesn't make any sense. David said, before I was in my mother's womb, you knew me. And we need to understand that that little child inside the womb has a soul that God has given it. And that soul will be there for all eternity. And they're precious little aborted babies whose souls are in heaven today. So, I think we need to have a relook. But for the Christian, who probably most of the people who are watching this are Christians, it's a serious distinction between the two platforms because the Democratic platform today is not what it used to be, and it's just bent on taking these little lives, and that's not a right that the Bible gives us, that God gives us, and so we're so politically divided today. How can you vote for a platform that is so they're running on what they call reproductive rights, which are really it's not the rights. And I've counseled hundreds of people over the years of my ministry, hundreds of people where there's been an abortion involved, and the scarring and the nightmares that come along later to the woman are incredible. So this is something that is an aberration in our society. It really goes back, we in the Old Testament where they worshipped Shamash and Molech, the Moabite gods, where they burned their little babies on these brazen arms. We can see again that same thing. Well, in essence, I don't want to be burdened with this child. I want prosperity in my home without that extra mouth to feed. And so they had that going, and it was an abomination, God said, and He called it that many times in the scriptures. And I think that this is an abomination here. And if we look at it worldwide, it's crazy because we in this country fund other countries to have abortions, like in Africa, like it's any of our business anyway over there, but we're funding for them to have abortions. And the blood is on somebody's hands. And I think for the Christians, you don't want it on your hands. There will be a reckoning for these things. And so there are distinctions between the two platforms.
Yeah, and voting for the left, they all lean abortion heavy. That's what they run on. So that's not something as a Christian that I can look at and say, if I vote for this, it's good except for that. Like that is their thing that they're running on, and the Roe v. Wade and the overturning and all of this. I can't vote for them and not put myself in. I've said yes to that.
And just one more thought on the abortion thing. So, Kamala Harris, who's running the ticket, has said that she would immediately make every effort to subvert the Supreme Court and make abortion legal throughout every state. In the last administration, that was given over to the states by the Supreme Court, which was a move in the right direction. It would be nice to have it no abortion in this country, but you can't legislate morality, as we've said before. But why, if I live in one particular state, and I don't know, I'm not sure which states, I think 20 states don't have abortion. If let's pick out Kansas and say it's one of them. I don't know if that's true or not. Whatever that state is, why should they have to have it when they have a conviction in that state and they have voted to say, we're not going to have it in our state? Now, if somebody really wants to have an abortion that bad, they can go over to the next state and then get it done. But why, as a taxpayer of that state and in the moral conscience of that state, why do I have to have it when we don't believe in it here? Why shouldn't it be the right of this state to say, no, we're not going to do that here? I think that they should have that right. I think President Trump was really right in that when he leaned it that way and when the Supreme Court then put it that way.
Yeah, and if you're like convicted about abortions, or I live in a state that has abortions up to nearly birth, as they say, as California, you can have it at pretty much at birth. You can have an abortion. The greatest thing you can do is vote to not have that legal in your state or in your country. Um, a lot of people think, oh, I just live in California, so it's just going to sway one way or the other, so it doesn't matter.
There are some states that do it even after birth, and if I'm not mistaken, I think Minnesota is one of those. But I could be wrong on that state. But when I was younger, if a little child were killed, and I wasn't, I mean, even in my younger married years, that was front page news. And people went to prison or for that kind of thing, or could face the death penalty for that. Now they're making it legal. What a slide that has been for this country. Yeah.
Yeah, the downturn. But if you do not have an abortion and you have a children, we have other issues, morality issues with parenting now. So I don't know if you want to hit that.
Yeah, so another thing is parental rights. So state versus state rights. These are on the two platforms, and if not spelled out, they're being espoused by those who are running. Is it right to have your child have, which we'll get into trans in a moment, but gender affirming care and perhaps even surgeries of mutilation toward that? Without the parents even being known about it, even knowing about it, or have an abortion without the parents knowing about it. These are the school teachers and people that are making these choices that are opening up the door for our children. And so that I can find out, well after that, maybe that my child has had an abortion or had a gender affirming, they call it surgery, in other words, gone trans from a boy to a girl or vice versa, without a parent even having any input into it. That is the platform of the left right now and not the right.
Yeah, yeah, the morality of that is just insane how God has given a gift of a child and he has birthed this within a couple of parents and they now have this obligation from the Lord to be parents. And I was reading Ephesians 6 the other day, and this is for children and for parents. It says, "Children, obey your parents because you belong to the Lord, for this is the right thing to do. Honor your father and your mother. This is the first commandment with a promise. If you honor your father and mother, things will go well for you and you will have a long life on earth." Are you guys ready for the parents? "Fathers, do not provoke your children to anger by the way you teach them. Rather, bring them up with discipline and instruction that comes from the Lord." So on one hand, you have children, and if you are a child or somebody growing up, a youth right now, you have an obligation from the Lord. He says, obey your parents, honor your parents, your father and your mother. There should never be a thought that crosses your mind that I'm going to make such a rash, big, huge decision where they are not involved, because the Lord has been gifted. He has gifted your parents to watch over you, to protect you, to pay your bills, right? And so on one end you have the kids to honor your parents, but then on the other end you have the father's obligation for instruction and for discipline. And when the parents don't have that role and the government is trying to take that spot of discipline, of instruction, then there is an issue that is not matching up with the Bible. And I would love to say it's not because our society is just so awesome that now parents don't have to do that role. My parents, my mom and my dad, still instructed me. They were the number one people who instructed me, who disciplined me, who taught me, who chastised me, right? And even though I went to school, they were the ones that poured into me.
It's funny, and I have my kids are all older, from 40 up to 52. One of them's almost as old as your father. Uh, I still instruct my children. And what I see between the two issues we've covered so far is I see, remember, Jesus said that Satan comes to kill, steal, and destroy. So I see in this the destroying and the killing with the abortion issue, and I see again tearing down the family unit that you just read about from Ephesians. So I look behind these issues. There's a spiritual battle going on, and I'm not saying that that the Democrats are all demonic or anything like that. I am saying there's a demonic push behind those two philosophies of killing the children, of destroying that home and destroying the home in both of the situations, with the parents being notified and being a part of their raising up their children, which is the biblical model, as opposed to the state coming in saying, no, we'll raise your kids, and by the way, kids, you don't need to tell your parents what we're doing. That's just really wrong. And so the full family thing is up on display, which kind of goes along with other things. And one more thing in that whole mix is the transitioning of kids. That again is being affirmed by the platform of the left, and we were, the Christian needs to remember what the Bible has to say about it. You found one of those verses.
Yeah,
Pop it on up.
this was written 3,400 years ago, approximately. And it's funny how God always has something for today in His Word. So this is Deuteronomy 22:5. "A woman must not put on men's clothing, and a man must not wear women's clothing. Anyone who does this is detestable in the sight of the Lord your God." Like, if the Bible doesn't apply, like that one verse applies more to today than ever before in history. How we're not supposed to be trans because God has actually created us in his image, in his likeness, for a purpose, for a plan. And when we try to go against that and we try to change our gender and our looks and our the way we talk and the way we think, like he has biologically made us for a purpose. And when we try to revert that, we are actually outside of the will of God, outside of what he has planned for our lives.
Yeah, it's called the woke agenda. And so the Christian has to make a stand there, and people will say, well, you're not being compassionate. No, I'm not compassionate about this issue because it's harming our children. It's not that I'm against a person who is transitioned or homosexual. I love, we want to reach everybody. Everybody's a sinner. That's not the issue here at all. The issue is that these kids are making these decisions, and then we've already got them reaching their 20s now and saying, what have I done? What have my parents done to me? Why didn't they stop me in this? Because like when I was a child, when I was a teenager, there's a lot of things that I wanted to be. I wanted to be an Air Force, pilot. I wanted to be this and that. I think when you're a little younger, well, I want to be a cowboy for my whole life. But you know what? That's when you're a kid. When you grow up, if you've done things, it's kind of like getting a tattoo when you're 13. By the time you're 20, you're saying, "What have I done?" Why would I put that on my skin? Because if you're going to have a tattoo, that's probably not the one you would pick. And it's the same thing with, once you've transitioned all the way through surgery, especially, you've done something for life. And there are a lot of kids already, and we've got lawsuits already with kids back to their parents. These are foolish things, and they certainly don't need to be made by the state. I think this is the problem between the two platforms. So I guess the whole morality thing that we're talking about is kind of wrapped up in all of this. We have an agenda from government trying to rule your home, and maybe some homes don't run very well, but still it's God's pattern. And so for the Christian especially, you have mandates in the scriptures, and don't be sucked in and feeling like you're somehow anti anything just because you hold to the biblical view. Just know your views. And I want to go back to what we said on the first week. This is why it's so important. This is why we're even doing this. When only 30% of registered Republican voters in this state 4 years ago showed up to actually vote. 30%. We could have a whole different situation if that, take that nationwide, because it probably holds nationwide. If Christians don't just get up and take their ballot in and vote, and encourage their friends and their kids to take their ballots in and vote, take every Christian especially, take your vote in and vote. If we don't do that, we're going to keep putting up with this nonsense, and it's not getting better, it's getting worse. We need to have people speak their voice. In our state, just last week, we had we had a Democratic state Senate person in Irvine pushed through a bill, which, of course, because we haven't been voting as Christians in our state, we have all Democrats in there. We have, if a Republican pushes a bill, it won't go anywhere. If a Democrat pushes a bill, it's going to be automatic. And our governor signed this in that it's against the law to require ID for voting in this state as of last week. Why would that be?
You have to have a driver's license to drive. You have to prove that you're able and you're a citizen and you passed the test or whatever the case is. And you can't just come
Yeah,
from another country and be in the military. You
you have
have
to have
to.
you have to have an ID to get a Costco card. You have to get an ID to get benefits. You have to get an ID to have a library card. You have to get an ID if you buy liquor. You have to get an ID for all these things, but not to vote. There's only one reason for that. That's because they want to cheat. People want to cheat. So let's not allow that. Let's get out and vote our convictions. God is very much in this. This was founded as a Christian nation. Read Patrick Henry on this, not as a religionist, but as a Christian country. The Christians wrote the Constitution of the United States. Read your true history on that and go back and just check it out. Don't give it away. Politics, we're very much involved in politics, so let's do the right thing. I don't want to go march or chant or rant or rave. Just go vote.
Yeah, you vote and pray. If my people called by my name humble themselves, they pray, they seek my face. That's where it starts, is where we humble ourselves, we pray, we seek his face, and we don't just shut the closet door and we never get out, but the Lord actually calls us to go and to vote and to do these things. If I don't vote, my convictions, then I can't expect change. When only 30% of Republicans vote in California, we're just handing over because we think there's no way. There's 70%. That's more than double. 70% of Republicans that don't vote. When we don't vote, we can't expect change. And that's why darkness is not some force, it's when light is absent. So when people don't show up and vote, the only thing left over is the absence, the darkness. But when a light comes through, there's a change and it's bright, and you see a difference in society.
So we have a month and 3 days until election. We'll be doing this every Thursday, which you get to see it on Mondays, the following Monday. But so I would encourage you, get registered. If you aren't registered, we have registration forms right here. Fill it out, send it in. You can fill it out here, we'll send it in. It doesn't matter. So come get registered or wherever you can. There's a lot of places you can get registered. You need to vote. I think we're going to try to have a drop-off box here. We're working on that right now. But you need to actually, if you register, actually follow it through and vote. I actually talk to your husband, your wife. Actually vote. This is the problem. We have been real lazy about it. Let's not be lazy about it this time. I agree. I know that President Trump said this. He's not the only one. This may be the most important election in our lifetime because if where we're at right now, we're about ready to go off the brink with some really, really dark things. Some of the things we're talking about right now. And so I think we need to be very cautious about this. I think the person who gets into office and a president, and then, really the House and the Senate behind him, is going to make a big difference on how we handle things in the Mideast, which is a big deal. Biblically, it's a huge deal. And so if we don't have the right person backing up Israel, for example, they have 200 million people around them who are enemies, and they want to destroy it. And so we need to be doing our part. That's what we need to do. So I'm going to kind of wrap this up right now for this week. We're glad you joined us. We pray that you let other people know about this. You can watch the last two. They're also on the queue. And if you'll look up the little red Vote 2024 on our webpage, ccvalvista.com. And right by the live stream, this is the red vote thing, and it has each one of these on there. So just, spread it out. Get other people to take a look at it. And let's get the vote out. Let's do this, and let's pray all the way through this thing, and let's see what the Lord might do on this time. Okay? Amen. Thank you, Micah.